This is Quideo number 3. So for our basic problem, it tells us that there is a string of Christmas lights that contains 20 lights. The lights are wired in a series so that if any light fails, the whole string will go dark. Each light has a probability of 0.02 of falling during a 3-year period. The lights fail independently of each other. What we're looking for is the probability that the string of lights will remain bright for 3 years. So we take the probability that of one light fails, which is 0.02, and then we find the probability that one light doesn't fail by subtracting the 0.02 away from 1, and we get 0.98. Then since we have 20 lights on the whole string that we don't want to fail, we raise the 0.98 to the 20th power, and we get 0.6676. That means that there is a 66.76% chance that the string of lights will not fail within the 3 years. For the advanced problem, we were given a study conducted by the American Society of Microbiology that looked at the hand-washing behavior of adults using public restrooms at airports. We are told that more than 30% of people using restrooms in New York airports, 19% in Miami airports, and 27% in Chicago airports aren't stopping to wash their hands. The results from this survey were then generalized to people who use public restrooms. So they want to know the population of interest. And the population of interest in this study is the adults that use public restrooms. We were then asked if the sample was selected in a reasonable way. I found that the sample was not selected in a reasonable way. They should have observed multiple public destinations to get more accurate data. Also, there was no randomness in this sample. They chose very populated cities, whereas if they would have maybe randomized how they got the samples, it could have been a more reasonable way to collect their data. After that, we were asked if the sample is likely to be a representative of the population of interest. So our population of interest is adults using public restrooms, but in this sample, it just looked at adults that use airport public restrooms. So I said that the sample is not a representation of the population of interest because airports, they do tend to contain probably wealthier people, so you're not getting an accurate representation of all adults who use public restrooms. And lastly, we were asked if there is any obvious source of bias. This problem is an example of undercoverage bias because we aren't getting a sample of all people. We were just getting a sample of people that used airports, and that isn't a very accurate sample of all adults in the United States. Also, airports are generally busier than a lot of public places, and so people tend to be in a hurry and might not have much time to wash their hands. Lastly, we have our AP question. In the AP question, we are told that students who live in a dorm have been complaining about the quality of food that has been served in that dorm. The dining hall manager decided to survey to estimate the proportion of students living in the dormitories who think the quality of food should be improved. So what the manager did was ask the first 100 students that entered the dining hall this question. They said, "Many students believe that the food served in the dining hall needs improvement. Do you think that the quality of food served here needs improvement, even though that would increase the cost of the meal plan?" Then they were asked to say yes, no, or no opinion. So then, based on this information, we were asked to explain how bias might have been introduced based on the way this convenience sample was selected, and how the sample could have been selected differently to possibly avoid that bias. So, a couple things that could have been a sign of bias is that students who eat dinner later might have a different opinion. Sometimes the students that maybe eating dinner later might not have as much time to eat, so they're not as picky about the food they eat, rather than the people who show up the earliest might be wanting a specific type of dinner, and so they might be let down easier with the food that might not be the best, but that not everyone may care as much about. Also, you could be getting dinner, heading to the dining hall with your friends, and they could influence your opinion. If one friend thinks the food needs improvement, the other friend might be influenced to say the same. And so that's not really getting much accurate data. So one way that this could be solved is randomly asking students throughout the night how they feel about the food, rather than just the first 100 people that walk in. The last problem asked us to explain how bias may have been introduced based on the way the question was worded and how it could be worded differently to avoid this bias. So first of all, the one thing that I noticed was that there was a ton of information in this one question. And majority of this information could heavily influence what students end up deciding on their opinion of the food. For example, at the very beginning, it says many students believe the food served in the dining hall needs improvement. This could influence students' response because if other people think it needs improvement, then that person may start to realize that it also needs improvement. Whereas before, they were completely satisfied with the food, and now all of their other classmates could influence their opinion. And then at the end, it says that improving the food would increase the cost of the meal plan, and this could influence someone's response because knowing it would be more expensive could sway people to say no just so that they don't have to spend more money. Because some people might be satisfied with not as good of food, but it's cheaper rather than spending a whole bunch of money on just a little bit more food. So because there was so much information that could just really influence someone's opinion, I believe that if we just took the section that's not highlighted and just ask the students simply, do you think the quality of food served in the dining hall needs improvement, that would get the point of what you're trying to get across by not also trying to influence their opinions. Because stating the other stuff influence their opinions, and you really just want to know what they personally think, and you don't want to sway them too much. So I think just stating that small little sentence could really do a lot.